Welcome to National Resource and Training Services online training. Today's course is Meth Knowledge for Private Investigators. Upon completion of this course, you'll be given an exam. After completing the exam, the results will be reviewed with you and then transmitted back to National Resource and Training, where they will then be directed to the state agency responsible for your continuing education requirements. You will also see a link at the end of the exam, which you may click to save or print a copy of this course for your personal use. Thank you for attending NRTS Online. What is methamphetamine? It is a synthetic amphetamine or stimulant that is produced and sold illegally in pill form, capsules, powder, or chunks. It's extremely addictive. It can be smoked, snorted, injected, or eaten. Some common street names for meth are crank, crystal meth, glass, speed, ice, zip, and quartz. Now it can have many other names. It just depends on the demographics, the area that you live in, so be familiar with those. Let's talk about how methamphetamine affects the body. It causes the brain to release dopamine, which is a natural chemical that makes you feel pleasure. Dopamine is vital to normal brain function. The presence of meth in the brain causes the brain to release an enzyme that destroys the surplus dopamine in the brain. This enzyme will destroy the brain's natural ability to produce dopamine over time. Some useful statistics here. 1 pound of meth can get 1,816 kids high for 12 hours or more. That's 1 pound. Of 500 law enforcement agencies surveyed in 45 states, 58% cited meth as their biggest drug problem, dwarfing cocaine, which came in at 19%, marijuana at 17%, and heroin at 3%. Let's talk a little bit about the history of meth. Meth was first synthesized in 1887 in Germany as amphetamine, and it was a drug in search for a disease. They basically created this drug with no use in mind, and then started looking for a disease that they could use it for. In the 20s, it was investigated as a cure for depression to decongestion. In the 30s, the drug was marked as Benzedrine in an over-the-counter inhaler to treat nasal congestion. A probable direct reaction to the Depression and Prohibition, the drug was abused and misused by non-asthmatics looking for a buzz. By 1937, amphetamine was available by prescription in tablet form. Methamphetamine, more potent and easier to make, was found in Japan in 1917. It was water soluble, so it was easy to inject. It was still produced legally in the United States and sold under the trade name of Dasoxin. Continuing with the history of meth, during World War II, amphetamines were widely used to keep fighting men going. During the Vietnam War, American soldiers used more amphetamines than the rest of the world did in World War II. In Japan, use of intravenous methamphetamines became epidemic proportion as WW2 military supplies became available to the public. In the 50s, students, truck drivers, and athletes used legally made tablets such as Dexedrine and Methedrine. In the 60s, the pattern of use changed drastically with the availability of injectable methamphetamines. The 1970 Controlled Substances Act restricted the production of injectable methamphetamine. Domestically, the large-scale production of methamphetamine is centered in California. It's surprisingly produced in Mexico and smuggled into the United States. Large-scale labs are well armed and often booby-trapped and monitored. Traditionally, the suppliers of domestic-made meth have been outlaw biker groups. Mexican-made meth is distributed by wholesale organized crime groups. Also, organized crime is poised to increase its supply as states crack down on the small home labs. Let's talk about some of the items that can be used as ingredients for producing meth, especially in the small home labs. And these are items that you'll need to look for when you're working cases or you're out and you suspect that there may be a meth lab. Pool acid, muriatic acid, red devil lye, acetone, brake fluid or brake cleaners, iodine, lithium metal or lithium batteries, drain cleaners like Drano or liquid fire, lighter fluid, cold medicines containing pseudoephedrine or ephedrine, ethyl ether or starting fluid, anhydrous ammonia, which is stored in propane tanks or coolers, red phosphorus, striker plates from matchbooks, coffee filters, mason jars or other glassware, hydriodic acid or disinfectants, hydrogen chloride gas, high phosphorus acid or metal plating, iodine, red phosphorus again, which you can find in a lot of pyrotechnics, phosphorus, which is in rat poison, sodium hydroxide, which you can find in drain cleaners, benzene, which is a gas additive, carbon tetrachloride, dry cleaning agents, chloroform, industrial use, ethyl ether, which is carburetor cleaner, starting fluids, freon, which is a refrigerant, hexane, which is an industrial solvent, methylene, used in paint strippers and degreasers, petroleum ether, toluene, which is also in paint thinner, and xylene, which is a sterilizing catgut. It's a cleaning agent for microscopy. Household products contain most of the necessary chemicals to complete the manufacturing process. Certain brands of drain cleaner, for instance, have a high concentration of sulfuric acid. When mixed with table or rock salt, hydrogen chloride gas is produced for use in the final stage of methamphetamine production. The hydrogen chloride gas procedure, as well as other procedures, are extremely dangerous and can cause death or serious injury not only to the individuals making the methamphetamine, but to others who may be living in adjoining houses or apartments. Everyday chemicals: alcohol or rubbing alcohol, toluene, which is brake cleaner basically, ether, engine starter, sulfuric acid, which you can find in drain cleaner, red phosphorus, which you can find in matches, road flares, salt, it can be either table salt or rock salt, iodine, lithium, which you can find in batteries, trichloroethane, which is a gun scrubber, MSM, which is a cutting agent, sodium metal, methanol, muriatic acid, and hydrogenous ammonia, sodium hydroxide, which is found in lye, pseudoephedrine, which you can find in cold tablets, ephedrine, which you can find in cold tablets, acetone, cat litter. Now, out of all the ingredients that we talked about, there are really only three main ingredients used to make meth. A lot of the other things we talked about are actually used in the production of it, or as cutting agents and so forth, but there are only three main ingredients to making meth: pseudoephedrine, iodine crystals, and red phosphorus. Here are some slang terms that you need to be familiar with, especially if you're needing to talk the talk. Crank craters. These are the sores on the face caused by meth use. A tooter is the small straw that they use to snort meth. Paper is a quarter gram. Teenager is 1/16 of an ounce. Needles are called points, rigs, and slammers. Paraphernalia, which is medical supplies or utensils. Tina or tina, this derives from the fact that meth is commonly bought in 1/16 of an ounce, or a baggie. 1 ounce is 28.34952 grams. An 8-ball, which is 1/8 of an ounce, 3.5 grams. The dealer absorbs at 0.34 grams. Pepsi means crack. Pepsi 1 means crystal. Coke means coke. Some interesting facts here, and some of the main reasons that people get into the production of meth and the sale of meth is the fact that a simple meth recipe can turn $50 investment in cold pills and chemicals into $8,000 to $10,000 of profit. Law enforcement agencies have seized labs in all 50 states. Meth labs have been found in homes, hotel rooms, abandoned buildings, trailers, garages, sheds, moving vans, car trunks, and even in backpacks. A pound of meth produces 5 to 7 pounds of toxic waste as a byproduct. Depending on the size of the lab, toxic waste cleanup of an abandoned lab site can cost up to $100,000. In most cases, property owners are solely responsible for this cleanup cost. Small meth labs account for more explosions, fires, uncontrolled hazardous waste dumping, and child endangerment than the large super labs. An average of 5 people in the U.S. die every year as a result of working in a meth lab. These meth labs explode all the time. Fires and explosions are the most common mishaps. 1 out of every 6 labs discovered is found because of an explosion or fire. An estimated 1.4 million Americans used meth in 2005. More than 75% of all drug treatment admissions in California is meth related, and the meth recovery rates are hovering around 6%, which is not good. What is the detection period for methamphetamine? Amphetamines are normally detectable in the urine for 24 to 72 hours after use. Methamphetamines stay in the system slightly longer, 24 to 96 hours. Still, though, this is not a long time to stay in your system. A person that knows they're going to be taking a drug screen, for instance, could wait several days and probably be able to take their drug screen and not show positive for meth. The problem there is that most people that are addicted to meth can't go that long. I mean, meth is just simply that addictive. Meth has a direct effect on children. Hundreds of children are neglected every year after living with parents who are meth cooks. More than 20% of the meth labs seized last year had children present. This is mainly due to the fact that most of the meth labs are small home labs. There's families present. Meth is being cooked in the kitchen. The children are walking through this. Some signs that a person may be using methamphetamine are: a person can exhibit anxiousness, nervousness, incessant talking, extreme moodiness and irritability, purposeless, repetitious behavior such as picking at the skin or pulling out hair, dilated pupils with redness on the iris, sleep disturbances, a false sense of confidence and power, aggressive or violent behavior, disinterest in previously enjoyed activities, and severe depression. Can methamphetamine be prescribed legally? And if so, why? Methamphetamine is a Schedule II stimulant, which means it has a high potential for abuse and is available only through prescription that cannot be refilled. There are a few accepted medical reasons for its use, such as the treatment of narcolepsy, attention deficit disorder, and for short-term use, obesity. But these medical uses are limited. The key is the dosage. Methamphetamine abusers use much higher dosages of the drug than a physician would routinely prescribe when treating a patient. Let's talk for a minute about how to deal with a person on meth. First of all, keep your distance. Coming too close can be perceived as threatening. These people are already on edge. No bright lights. The tweaker, which is the person that's on meth, is paranoid, and bright lights may cause them to react violently. Slow your speech and lower your voice. Slow your movements. As we said, the tweaker is paranoid and may misunderstand your movements. Keep your hands visible so that they don't feel threatened or become violent. Keep the tweaker talking. A tweaker who falls silent can be extremely dangerous. Silence often means that his paranoid thoughts have taken over reality, and anyone present can become part of his or her paranoid delusions. If you are threatened, call the police and tell them that this person may be under the influence of meth or another drug. Here are some illustrations, some photos actually, of things found in some home labs. The person you see in the suit there is part of a cleanup team. But you can see the containers. You can see in the bottom right hand photo some packages of lithium batteries that they were using to get chemicals from, the lithium that they need. You see a jar sitting there that has 3 distinct layers in it. This is where they're separating the cutting agents from the actual meth. Some additional photos from a meth lab. Of course, you can see up in the top left the meth powder. Over on the right top is a small package. It's got about an ounce of meth in it. Down in the lower left corner are some ingredients that were found in this particular home that were being used in the meth lab. You can see some of the household cleaners we talked about, and some of the brake fluids and drain cleaners that were being used. More so than any other drug out there, it's pretty easy to spot someone who's been using meth for a while. As you can see by some of these photos, I mean, the wild look in their eyes, the anxious look, the crank craters that we're talking about, the open sores on the arms, the face. Pretty much what's happening here is the human body knows that these chemicals, and it's not actually the meth itself, it's all the chemicals that were used to cut the meth, the rat poisons and drain cleaners and the iodine, the lye. The body knows that these things are not good for it and tries to expel them through the pores. That's what causes the open sores. They lose their teeth. I'm talking about a person that's been on meth for less than a year, 6 months, can start showing signs of tooth decay and the gums bleeding and just losing their teeth. Here at the bottom right is a photo of some methamphetamine powder. It's kind of a yellowish color. Meth addiction is also up among females. Health and addiction experts say the increase could be attributed to a growing number of women using the drug not only recreationally but to help lose weight or combat fatigue or deal with low self-esteem. Meth provides a superman or a superwoman complex, said Dr. Glenn Hansen, senior advisor to the National Institute on Drug Abuse in Washington, D.C. Some people turn to it because it helps them deal with the pain and self-esteem problems of abusive relationships. Here another photo. You see the young lady in a 1998 photo, and just 4 years later, after continued meth use. Methamphetamine, more than any other drug out there, just completely physically wrecks a person. She looks like she's aged 15 years. You can see the changes in this young lady's appearance. If you look close enough, also the desperation in her eyes. These people go through a complete physical and emotional change. Here's an example of the crank craters, or the sores that we talked about. And these start occurring after just several months of meth use. Like I said earlier, this is simply the body trying to expel these poisons and toxins from the body. Some signs of meth labs. Here are some of the common items that you'll see. Especially large quantities of cold medications, which contain pseudoephedrine, and a lot of boxes and blister packs that contain things such as Sudafed and brake cleaners, battery packs. Another sign is abnormal quantities of Drano, Red Devil lye, and other drain openers. It's not uncommon to see one or two of these items in a person's garage or their closet where they may keep cleaning agents or under the sink. But abnormal quantities, such as you see here in this photo, would be a little bit unusual. Abnormal quantities of solvents such as toluene, acetone, denatured alcohol, Coleman camping fuel. Like I said, small amounts of these items is not that uncommon, but in large amounts, you see someone with a case of acetone or Coleman camping fuel, maybe an indication that there's a small meth lab in place. You'll see a lot of coffee filters or other type filters with abnormal stains. Stains will usually be red, pinkish color. Jars or other glassware with separated liquids. Now in the top photos you can distinctly see several layers, and this is basically where they've added all the chemicals we talked about, the cutting agents that are used to separate the methamphetamine, which in the photo on the right, in the upper right hand corner, you'll see that first jar, that white layer in the middle. That's the methamphetamine. That's what they want. Now the layer on top of that and the 2-3 layers under that is the hazardous waste that usually gets dumped in the ground or flushed down the toilet. But now what you got to look at here is most home meth labs, most small meth labs, they'll use something like a turkey baster to reach into this jar and remove the top layer, the first couple of layers of waste from the methamphetamine that they want to get to. And then they'll start removing the methamphetamine that's in the middle. The only problem is how much of this hazardous waste that's on top of and below the actual methamphetamine that they want, how much of these chemicals get left in. I mean, let's face it, using a turkey baster or any type of item where you're going in to remove the hazardous items, a lot of it's going to be left. A lot of it's going to be in that layer of meth that they take out and cut and sell. The person that's doing meth never knows what kind of chemicals or other harmful agents that they're putting into their body. You'll see a lot of Pyrex or other cookware with unusual paste or stains remaining in them. Take a minute and familiarize yourself with the photos here. Any container with an unusual tube or hose coming out of the top is probably an indication there may be a meth lab. This is definitely not normal and almost always means that there's some type of meth lab or other drugs being produced. Other signs of meth labs: unusual quantities of automotive fluids and additives, heat, starting fluid, brake cleaners. Like we said, it's not uncommon for a home garage to have maybe a couple of bottles or several bottles of these automotive fluids, but several cases may be an indication that something else is going on here. Propane or other tanks with unusual fittings or valve discoloration. Unusual quantities of lithium batteries or batteries that have obviously been opened. Muriatic or other acids. One container, once again, probably not uncommon for anyone to have. But larger quantities of a muriatic acid, good indication there's a meth lab. Other potential signs of a meth lab: excessive trash or trash burning despite having trash pickup. Usually the last thing that a person wants that has a small meth lab going in their home is to put their waste or the agents that they're using to produce the meth in the trash pickup. So you'll usually find these people, even though they have trash pickup, with some type of barrel or a pile in the backyard and burning their trash. Windows that are blacked out with plastic, aluminum foil, blankets, and so forth. Strong security measures when compared to the location. Heavy traffic, a lot of people coming and going, especially at night. Also frequent visitors who don't stay long. People usually that are just showing up long enough to make their purchase and then get out. One of the major problems with cleanup is the cost. Each pound of methamphetamine produced leaves behind 5 or 6 pounds of toxic waste. Methamphetamine cooks often pour the leftover chemicals and byproducts down drains, down storm drains, or directly onto the ground. The cleanup of these labs is extremely resource intensive and beyond the financial capabilities of most jurisdictions. It's just simply hard for a small jurisdiction, a small county, with their budget restraints to absorb the cost of the cleanup. Average cost is about $5,000, but some cost up to $100,000 or more. Some of the health hazards posed from exposure to residual contamination. The methamphetamine can cause numerous neurological effects: stroke, cerebral vasculitis. Infants are at greatest risk. Iodine can affect the thyroid or pulmonary edema. Red phosphorus has effects on the eyes. The respiratory irritants, causes burns. Phosphine gas can cause respiratory impairment. It's also toxic. Acids, of course, can affect the eyes, respiratory. It's an irritant. Caustics, the metals, can cause burns. Of course, spontaneous fires. A lot of the solvents, form carcinogens, can harm the liver. They're flammable. Sharps, or the needles, of course, spread hepatitis and also potential HIV infection. What can you do as a private investigator? Of course, if you come across what you think are signs of a meth lab during one of your investigations, then by all means contact and work with authorities. But also use the information you've got here to educate others. You can purchase a copy of this slideshow without the narration from nrts.org, National Resource and Training Services. Take this out and do it as a public service. Do this presentation for the Chamber of Commerce, for a local school or civic organization. And at the same time, while you're providing a valuable public service, promote and advertise your business. Mostly just be aware of your surroundings. If you see a lot of the items that we've talked about are signs or indications that there's a meth lab or some type of illegal drug activity taking place, then just be aware and be mindful. Keep yourself and your clients safe. Thank you for attending NRTS Online.